All right. So, I saw a very interesting article. So I hit up Captain Paul and I said, yo, I want to figure out what does Captain Paul think about this question here? What is causing the baby bust? I ran into this article this morning and I was just like, damn. I saw the results of a study several months ago when they looked at the fact that they were expecting a whole lot of babies to be born. And then when the babies weren't born around December, because, end of February, beginning of March, the lockdown happens. People are locked in their houses. There's nowhere to go. So they're thinking that there was going to be a whole lot of inserting tab A in the slot B. And that would then produce, a bunch of little, humanoids coming out around December. But what they found was that wasn't the case.
No.
So, check this out, people. This is from CNN. I think very early today. We're starting to see how the pandemic affected births in the United States. So in this article, the data includes December 2020, where they thought that there was going to be a lot of babies being born because they assumed that there was going to be a lot of fucking during lockdown.
Assumed wrong.
They assumed wrong. Year over year, from December 2019 to December 2020, births had decreased more than 6%. So, you might be asking, well, where did they get this information from? And they're talking about like birth certificates signed, up through about 99% of all birth certificates signed in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So, you would think that people was going to be, doing the damn thing. But if you look at this chart here, you'll see that, you had a bunch of births that happen in July and August because when it kind of gets cold, people like to cuddle. And sometimes the tab A finds its way into slot B.
Yeah.
But they thought that, from March to April, we would get a little something in December. And there was a very, very, very slight uptick from the low of November. But then again, if you look at the 2020 line and you compare it to the 2019 line, if you look at this difference, this is a stark ass difference.
Yeah, it is.
So, and if you look at the full chart, because what you see here is kind of grayed out, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, these lines continue to come down year over year over year. Every year we're seeing less births.
Yep.
So
less kids being put into the world, man.
So, and of course, the article goes on to say that, U.S. births were already decreasing, as we already showed in that line graph. And we've had, we're talking about the lowest number of births since 1979. It's also pretty interesting. A record low of 55.8 births per 1,000 women ages 15 to 44. So that's going to be the ages where you're going to have the best opportunity to breed healthy offspring. Can girls age 12 give birth? Yes. Can women age 70 give birth? Yes. But, they're keeping it in a range where reasonable people try to get knocked up or accidentally get knocked up. So, when the study first came out, I heard a whole lot of, conjecture about why the birth rates are low. And if you listen to the feminists, they wear this as a badge of honor. They see it as a victory for society that we are breeding below replacement rates. So when you looked at this article, Captain, Captain Crunch.
Yeah, I'm gonna get that.
What you should, son. You should. Look out for it, folks. We're putting it together. We're putting our branding together, one dumbass idea at a time.
Shit.
When you looked at this article, what and you kind of, from the way that you see the world, what was your impression of why the birth rates are dropping so precipitously?
Well, I don't think it's just the pandemic alone, right? I think it's a multitude of issues, but regarding the pandemic, because there was a little bit more of a little bit uptick in increase when it comes to the lack of human beings being born into the world. I think it's hard to have kids when you're going through a financially tough time, when you're not financially stable or secure in your job, because like how many people were laid off throughout this whole pandemic? Like millions and millions of people. So I think that definitely plays into it. And now more than ever, especially recently, like we have a lot of we have Plan B, we have like condoms, we have birth control, we have a lot of ways that we can prevent childbirth, especially in scenarios we don't want it to happen, compared to historically. But I just think as a whole, like it's very hard to go forward and have a kid when like, oh shit, like I don't know if I'm going to keep my job next month. I don't know if I'm going to have a job next month or even next week. A lot of industries, even my own, was heavily affected. Like me and my girl were just talking about kids and how we'd probably wait until we're in a extremely secure financial position before we have it. And I think that's what a lot of people are deciding to do. It's that like, if we're going to have kids, like we want to make sure we're a little bit older, a little bit more financially stable. That way we're not flying by the seat of our pants, hoping that we can pay rent month to month. You know what I mean? Just kind of living fucking paycheck by paycheck. I think a lot of people don't necessarily want to live that way. And then society, I think as a society as a whole, though, the past, I would say 5, maybe even decade or so, is it just seems like, how do I put this? I think that certain women look down upon having children, if that makes sense, right? It's not as desirable as it used to be in like the 1950s, for example. You know what I mean? Like, having a husband, having kids. Like, a lot of women want to be high earners or more career driven, and instead of kind of having that, I would say, nuclear family, they kind of want to have just like their own career paths and their own goals. They want to have that before they actually have kids. And I think in totality, there's a lot of underlying reasons that I'd say there's a big decrease in having kids from 2021, from like 1960s or even the 1990s. You know what I mean? I don't know if we'll ever get back to the desirability that a lot of women had. Like, they want to have kids right at the age of like 18, 19, 20. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of women want to go out there and probably are a little bit more career driven. I guess that's kind of my take. I think the pandemic, where lack of financial stability, financial security as well, you have a loss of jobs all around the country. So it's not just the women, but it's the men losing work as well. I think that played into it. You also have a lot of different birth control, a lot of different ways to prevent yourself from having kids. And then I just think as a society, I think a lot of people are moving away from that idea of like, oh, I need to have a kid by the age of like, I don't know, 30, for example. I think that's what kind of plays into it.
Well, I agree with pretty much everything you said. You covered a lot of the things that I wanted to talk about. So I'll just stick to the actual point of the video. We're talking about how the Rona specifically, because I think all of those things did have an effect on the decisions that people made during the lockdown. Mm-hmm. But I think that there are some other factors that are at play. And, it'd be easy to blame feminism and say, oh, feminism is working hard to keep men and women apart. And I don't think that is necessarily untrue. But I'm going to try to dig a little bit deeper and say that there is a lot of financial incentive for companies of all sizes to keep as many individual consumers out there in the world as possible.
Yeah.
So if you can keep men and women separated from each other, then you're doubling the overhead costs of these people. If you don't have two people living under one roof, then those two people will require two roofs. So what
Yeah.
does that do? It creates an extra landlord. There are extra grocery trips that are needed, extra gas needed to fuel the extra car
Oh, we've
that
had this
might be.
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of financial incentive to keep people apart. So if you add all of these societal concerns, because I think the concerns are valid. I have them.
Mm.
I'm pretty old. You can see the white in my beard, even though my beard is kind of short. So you can tell I'm getting up there. And a lot of my decision not to have children at this point in my life has to do with societal instability, and that includes economics. It includes, where things are going from a social standpoint.
Mm.
A lot of the stuff that they're pushing on the kids has nothing to do with history, math, science, English. A lot of the stuff they're pushing on the kids have nothing to do with actual education, but pushing forth certain agendas that these people personally feel attachments to.
Right.
So it's almost like you send your kid to school to learn about math, and they're trying to teach your kid, you know, their brand of morals. And a lot of people don't want to deal with that. Just,
No.
Just the way it is. So, people don't want to have undue influences on the children. They're looking at mass school shootings as a huge issue. They don't want to go to work one day, send their kid to school, and then find out that their kid was the unlucky one, and they got to come, claim the body. So
Yeah.
there are so many different things that make people uncomfortable about trying to raise children in modern society that it does not surprise me at all. But I think when you look at the Rona specifically, when you have people living apart, men and women separated from each other, men and women having really horrible communication skills, horrible coping skills. So even the ones that are living together are filing for divorce.
Yeah.
So there are a bunch of different things at play that shows that society is crumbling around the edges, and with us not reproducing at least towards replacement rate, we run into a situation where our economy is in danger.
Right.
If you don't have workers to replace the people who are aging, if you don't have consumers to replace the consumers that are aging, then long term, our economy is just not viable. So some people may wear it as a badge of honor. You might have some MG toe guys that think, yeah, I'm not having any babies. You're not going to run me through the child support system. And then you have these feminists that says, yeah, making babies is an infringement on my body, or, I can, do that all by myself, and I don't need no man, and all this other garbage.
Get some sperm
When you have this separation between the sexes like this, it causes things like this. And the thing is, people were worried about overpopulation, but now in the developed world, we're worried about, certain races going extinct in the next 100 to 250 years. We're talking about Koreans as a race disappearing by 2250 because of the low birth rates. So
yeah, but couldn't you say, and this is just kind of more of a devil's advocate here, is that due to innovation when it comes to the workplace and as a whole, you don't need as many workers, right? Like with all the advances we've made in technology, that the assembly line can essentially be a lot less people on the line itself, and you can just use a robot arm, or robot just moving thing place to place. You're always going to need that human being to kind of dictate how things go. I guess that'd be kind of like a devil's advocate. I do get what you're understanding though. Like with less human beings, less consumers out in the world, the economy is going to take a hit. But I don't know. It would be very interesting to see how this plays out. Is this just going to be a continuous trend where it's just always going downward, or is this just going to be a blip on the map for the last 10 years or so? When I was looking at the graph, or how many years or so, or maybe in the 2030s, maybe there's a big baby boom. You know what I mean? Just depending on how things go politically, um, domestic and foreign, right? Because I think there's so many factors when it comes into having a kid, and especially right now, if we're just talking about the pandemic alone. I know personally myself, I don't want to have a kid right now. I do want to have a few down the road, but right now, with how unstable the economy is, how unstable the workforce is, it's just very hard to kind of commit to such like a long-term commitment. And you are right, like feminists and those MGTOW guys. I'm probably butchering that. How do you say that? MGTOW, right?
I guess.
Men going their own way. Those guys, right? I think there's a little bit of lunacy on both ends right there. It's like men and women do need each other. I think men and women complete the other side as one another. Like they're not carbon copies of one another, which I see being pushed in society. Like, oh, a man can do exactly what a woman does, or a woman can do exactly what a man does. Like, no, like there's actual genetic and just there's just differences between men and women, which isn't a bad thing. That's a good thing. Like what a man's not really good at, a woman can do, or what a woman's not very good at, a man can do. Like, we complement one each other, which we have done. Like if you look at any species on this planet of animal, generally the other side does what the other can't. And like for hundreds of thousands of years, men and women have always been compatible and always been together because they're like the man is the hunter, you know what I mean, and the woman's the gatherer and the home taker. So it's just not to go into a whole different discussion. I think as a whole in society, I think those radical ends of the spectrum need to kind of realize like, hey, like men and women do complement each other. Yeah, is there some kind of disparity when it comes to like the whole like child support and stuff like that? That's a whole different discussion we can kind of have. But I do think that men and women together are definitely more happy when they're together than separate, because that's also something you see with a lot of feminists. It seems like feminists and MGTOW guys, like they can boast about how their life is, oh, this is great, I'm going my own way, I'm free from the shackles. But a lot of those people suffer from depression and kind of like a lack of belonging in a lot of ways in their own life because they feel like a part's missing. And I don't know, that's just kind of more my analysis of the situation, as I think that men and women definitely do far better together than apart.
Well, I'll go and I'll address your devil's advocate scenario and say that automation is more of a problem. And we'll talk about automation in other videos, so I'm not going to get too deep into it here. But you could say that automation can be like a stopgap measure or something that looks like a solution to the loss of workers. But really, the main problem is that as the current generations of people, talking about the baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, Generation Z, as those people age out, there is not going to be anybody coming behind to help support society. So a lot of the services that would be needed as each generation ages, they're just not going to be there. So I think that looking at automation as a possible solution, I think is pretty foolhardy. But as far as everything else that you said about the long-term effects and why we make the decisions that we do, I think that we're pretty much in an agreement on that. So we want to turn it over to you guys in the comments section. We want to know, what do you think? Because there might be some things that we didn't mention. Yeah. What do you think caused the Rona baby bust? And we don't just want to identify the problem. We want to perhaps bring possible solutions. So down in the comments section below, let us know what you think. And we'll see you on the next video.
Sounds good.